Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Friday. It's Alissa Coram, and I'm joined by Justin Nielsen today. On Stock Market Today, we're going to be taking a look at the charts of Adobe as well as PayPal and Atlassian. But first, let's take a look at those major indexes. We capped off the week on a positive note with the NASDAQ finishing up 1.7%, the S&P 500 up 1.4%, the Dow up 1.1%, and we really just saw strength throughout the day building and into the close. So again, capping off the week on a positive note here.
Yeah, so what's not to like here? It's an outside day, which means that the high was above the high of the previous day and the low was below the low of the previous day. So it's not like you didn't have some tests in there, but those tests were successful. We passed, and it just keeps us in that trading range. Now for the week, we were pretty much flat, but that's actually not a bad thing. When you've come up so much from the bottom, it was really good for us to take this break, and we've been talking a lot about this trading range that we've been seeing on the NASDAQ composite. So that's kind of starting at that, right there, that 3685 area, and right below where it filled in the gap earlier this week. And again, that could have easily shaken you out of a number of stocks, especially if you were doing very tight stops, but we recovered very quickly. And the result is now we see a lot of setups in the market. So we see a lot of stocks that have kind of flattened out, made handles onto their cups. And so the best thing you can do for yourself this weekend is get prepared for next week, because this is a big earnings season coming up for the next 2 weeks. There could be a lot of action happening. And if you've got your short list ready, when one of these goes and when the market kind of crosses above that 86, 85 area, it's pretty likely that a lot of these stocks are going to be moving at the same time above those buy points.
Right. You don't want to be waiting until these breakouts are happening to do that research and making sure they check off all the boxes to add them to your portfolio. So it's great to go in with that battle plan, like you said.
So a few things for homework. You might check out the big picture today, because that's going to give you a daily summary, and check out Mike's stock market update, his weekly stock market update, because you'll probably get some ideas of what to expect from both of those.
Yes, those are fantastic. And you can find both of those by going to the market trend tab at the top of the investors.com navigation. And speaking of stocks that are looking good, let's take a look at Adobe, a leader in the software space. And if you talk about something that has a lot of gold stars, I mean, Adobe stock of the day today, a long-term leader, and some action for Adobe in terms of being added to Swing Trader and Leaderboard.
Right. So when you see something that keeps on appearing over and over, either on investors.com or on our products, that's really something that's screaming out to you. It means it's something that's really getting our attention, that there's something special there. And with Adobe, it has resistance right there just above 350. And a lot of times these round numbers, they come up over and over and over again. But what we were looking at for Adobe was a little bit of an early entry here. Again, an outside day on this one, and it's crossing that trend line that Ali is drawing. And so this was kind of actionable as an early entry today. Now, you can still wait until it crosses above that traditional 350, 48 buy point, and that's fine. But for those that like to sneak in a little bit early, you could get in. Just realize that sometimes they're more failure prone when you sneak in early, and you could be waiting for a little while, but it does get you a better price.
And like you said, this is a long-term leader. So if you take a step back and you're looking at these longer-term views here, getting in a little early may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, a lot of times with long-term leaders, we're doing the pullbacks, and as you just showed on that monthly chart, I mean, if you just look at the relative strength line, this is something that's just absolutely fantastic, and it really started when they went from that licensing model to a subscription service model. And that's one of the things that, in terms of their creative suite that they have, this is not something that people are going to be getting rid of right now. I mean, they can easily use that creative suite from home, and it's very sticky in terms of that, because a lot of developers have come to rely on their suite of products.
Definitely. And also on our radar, we want to take a look at PayPal, ticker there's PYPL. Now, it seems to me, Justin, that since the coronavirus crash, there's been a little bit of rotation within this payments group. Before we were really looking at Visa and MasterCard, and now PayPal really stepping into the spotlight.
We were expecting a lot of weakness with all of the payment processors, but PayPal is setting itself apart. It is really kind of moving very differently from a lot of the other members of the group. And so when you see a divergence like that, it's very important to take note of it. So our traditional buy point here would be at 124.55. We've been really just skyrocketing up there. Personally, I would love to see it pause a little bit here, because whenever
Mhm.
you get those moves that go straight up and all the way through on a cup base, those can be a little nerve-wracking. So I would love to see a pause here, and if that happens, it could set up for a little bit of an earlier entry, like a handle formation. But this one is looking very strong and could just easily go through that level next week, especially if the market starts running.
Yeah, and also something to note is we are expected to get earnings from PayPal towards the beginning of May. So not imminent, but
Mhm.
definitely around the corner. And speaking of earnings around the corner, we will be getting earnings next week from Atlassian. The ticker there is Team. Now, this one has been flirting, I guess you could say, with that cup with handle entry here. Hasn't been able to quite just stay solidly above it, but it is technically in buy range right now, headed into the report next week.
Right. So that makes it a little tricky because Thursday, April 30th is when the earnings are due. That's not a lot of time. So if you have already bought this, um, it might be tough to get a cushion in the meantime. However, if you did buy it and you do get that cushion, a lot of times, as long as we have about a 5% cushion going into earnings, we can hold on to it and give ourselves a little bit of room because we've got a little cushion, and so even if the market kind of knocks it down, we're not going to get too hurt in terms of our capital. But if it really kind of just continues to flatten out here, that might be a tough
Mhm.
buy ahead of earnings. But earnings often do act as a catalyst. So if that were to gap up, or even go through kind of an area of that previous high that it made, that could kind of give you an alternate entry, or even as you're noting right there, move on that downtrend. So a lot of options here, but just keep in mind, and you should know this for all of the stocks that you own or are watching, because the next 2 weeks are going to be very, very busy in terms of the earnings. So know when those earnings dates are so you're not surprised and not caught off guard when you have a big move in your stock and you weren't expecting it.
That's right. And when it comes to earnings coverage, investors.com is definitely the place to go for a look at how these top growth stocks are performing. We definitely have those earnings preview stories for you as well as and cover the reports and the stock reaction. But like you said, it's good to know when those dates are, what the expectations are, and the metrics to be looking for in addition to earnings and sales.
It has been so important when these earnings calls are happening, and guidance is one of those things that's going to be very tough in a coronavirus economy. When we're not quite sure when the shutdown will end and things like that, it's going to be kind of tough for a lot of these companies to give guidance, and so it's going to be very important to watch very carefully what's happening in the market, and with these stocks as they react.
Yes. And you know where else we are watching the market and stocks very closely? IBD Live. So you can bet the conversation will continue there Monday morning. If you haven't joined us yet, make sure you check it out. Go to investors.com/IBD Live for all the details. But needless to say, next week is going to be a pretty key week. Like you said, we are seeing a lot of setups here now, Justin, heading into
Yeah.
earnings.
Yep. And so just as a matter of what happens next week with the market, because that will probably be the catalyst that works for a lot of these stocks moving higher.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. And we'll see you right back here on Monday.